I knew something was wrong when legal asked me, casually, like they were ordering a sandwich, if I still had physical possession of the production signer. My coffee hadn't even kicked in yet. I just stared at the message for a full minute, rereading it like it might magically decode itself into something less suicidal. Production signer. That production signer. The one no one had mentioned since the 2019 restructure, when I kept in a fireproof box next to my cat's ashes and my dad's army knife. That message was a smoke signal from a dumpster fire they hadn't even realized they'd lit. Let me rewind a little before we get to the corporate arson. My name's Michelle, 45, mother of none, unless you count the server cluster I once nicknamed after Golden Girls characters. 14 years. 14 glorious, dusty, thankless years I spent inside that building, living on Mountain Dew and passive-aggressive JIRA comments. My official title? Senior Systems Compliance Engineer. Unofficially, the person who made sure every launch didn't trigger a federal investigation or tank the company's stock price. They never really knew what I did. That was the beauty of it. When you're good at infrastructure, they forget you exist, until a pipe bursts and suddenly everyone's praying to the plumbing gods. Most days, I liked it that way. Kept the company compliant, monitored release access, handled the cryptographic keys like they were Fabergé eggs, and watched every new exec stroll in with their MBAs and bravado, thinking they could streamline the legacy stack. I let them. I watched them. And I waited, not because I'm some puppet master, but because when you've been ignored long enough, you become invisible. And when you're invisible, you see everything. I'd go in early, stay late, quietly reject unauthorized code, pushes from junior devs who thought GitHub was a playground. I signed off on the quarterly compliance forms that no one read, and I was the last stop before production builds were released into the wild. And yes, I did freelance audit work for nonprofit orgs, fully declared, legally contracted, not even in the same industry. I did it on weekends. It kept me sane. But to Lexi, that meant I was a traitor. Oh, Lexi, CEO's daughter, the main character of her own delusion. She arrived last summer like an HR hurricane wearing $900 heels and the expression of someone who's only ever been told she's special by people legally required to love her. Within a month, she'd been made VP of Operations. We need fresh eyes, the board said. What they meant was we're afraid of her dad. Suddenly, my 14 years of institutional knowledge meant less than her Instagram followers. Lexi was on a mission to make the company lean, mean, and optimized for scale. Translation: fire the old guard, make TikToks with the interns. At first, I kept my head down. I watched her rename our team Slack channels to things like Compliance Hype Zone and audit goals. She replaced our incident reports with color-coded emoji summaries. I kid you not, one of them read, "Fire grimacing prohibited." That was a payment API outage that cost us $70K in SLA violations. But hey, she added sparkle GIFs, so it was fine. Still, I didn't care. I'd survived 4 CTOs, a ransomware scare, and that one guy who thought agile meant yelling at people in stand-ups. Lexi was just another storm to wait out, until my name showed up in the all-hands. And hey, while I've got you, if you're enjoying the slow descent into corporate chaos, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Maybe even subscribe. 95% of you won't, and that's fine, but it does help the team keep feeding this beast. Plus, every click makes an exec somewhere sweat, and I'm all for that. Anyway, back to the show. The all-hands started like any other. Bad lighting, bad jokes, bad news. Lexi led it, flanked by people who looked like they were waiting for a smoothie order. She called out my name. "Michelle Reynolds," she said, like she was about to hand me an Oscar. "It's come to our attention you've been working 2 jobs. This violates our ethical alignment policy." I blinked. Ethical alignment? That wasn't a policy. That was a phrase someone made up in a yoga class. I unmuted. Calmly. I wasn't angry yet. "My contract explicitly allows external consulting," I began, but I didn't even get to finish. She muted me in front of 142 people. Just cut me off mid-sentence and said, with all the smugness of a spoiled child who just broke your phone and blamed the floor, "We don't pay people who work 2 jobs, and that was the moment something in me snapped. Not loudly, not visibly. Just a quiet, tectonic shift in my spine. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just reached into my drawer, wrapped my fingers around a tiny USB-C token with a scratched metal edge, and smiled. Because they didn't know. They'd forgotten. Or maybe they never bothered to read the footnotes. But I remembered. I remembered the restructuring memo from 2019, the buried clause in the security update, the chain of custody logged in legal's audit software. I remembered the CTO's face when I handed him the token 3 years ago and said, if I get hit by a bus, it's in my safe. And I remembered when he quietly signed it back to me, off the books, during a transition panic no one wanted to talk about. The production signer, the cryptographic heart of the whole goddamn system. One key to rule them all, one token. Mine. The day after the all-hands ambush, I showed up to work like normal. Same cargo pants, same worn-out hoodie that said Patch Tuesday is my cardio. Nobody made eye contact. Slack was silent. Junior engineers who usually hovered by my desk with half-baked Docker questions now acted like I'd been caught skinning kittens in the parking lot. Word had spread fast, and in typical office fashion, distorted in transit. By lunch, I'd supposedly been running a shadow compliance agency out of my garage, laundering crypto donations for Greenpeace, and possibly doing it all topless. I didn't speak. I didn't defend. I just watched the glass walls of the open office reflect Lexi as she strutted past, holding an iced oat milk thing, and pretending she hadn't just publicly executed me with a microphone click. Let me tell you how this really started. 3 weeks before that Zoom crucifixion, Lexi began what she called streamlining legacy infrastructure. That was her polite way of saying she wanted to gut anything or anyone that didn't come with a startup-wide backstory and a six-pack. My name landed on her radar. Because of an HR optimization audit, she outsourced to some consulting firm that sounded like a skincare brand, Unoya Partners, or something equally pretentious. They ran keyword scans, flagged my 1099 work with a couple nonprofit orgs, spat out a PDF with red boxes and bold font. Dual employment risk, it said. Lexi, not understanding the difference between a contractor and a meth dealer, latched onto it like a tick on a fat dog. Truth is, I'd been doing after-hours compliance reviews for years, mostly for community organizations, housing nonprofits, small clinics that couldn't afford full-time auditors. My contract allowed it. Hell, HR signed off on it. Nuance doesn't fit in Lexi's world. She saw it, branded it a betrayal, and decided it was her moment to show executive leadership. She didn't come to me directly. That would have required eye contact and the faintest whiff of spine. No, she waited until the next all-hands. We were 30 minutes in, sales was droning through a pipeline update, the kind where numbers blur and everyone's eyes glaze like a Krispy Kreme window, and then Lexi hijacked the meeting. Before we wrap, I have one compliance issue to surface, she chirped, fake casual. Michelle Reynolds, can you unmute? I did. Against every bone in my body telling me this was a trap, I clicked that unmute button and said yes. Lexi smiled like a game show host about to say you've been served. It's come to our attention, she said, that you've been working another job. This violates our company's ethical alignment policy. Again with that nonsense phrase. Ethical alignment. Sounds like something you'd hear from a cult chiropractor. I cleared my throat. I've done nonprofit compliance consulting for years. It's approved. Clause 9.2, subsection C of my contract, and then she muted me. Mid-sentence. Not a tech glitch. Not a mistake. She muted me. I saw the little icon light up. My name grayed out like a ghost. And then she delivered the final blow as if rehearsed. We don't pay people who work 2 jobs, she said. Sweet as battery acid. That's not who we are. The Zoom chat died. Cameras turned off. The air went dead. I sat there, still muted, watching her bat her lashes like she'd just ended world hunger. That's when the shift happened, not in my reputation, but in my resolve. Because in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't just Daddy's little princess fumbling through power plays. This was strategic humiliation. Lexi wanted blood on the floor. She wanted everyone to know who spilled it. She picked me because I was invisible. Because I never fought for airtime, never hogged credit. Because my work kept the house standing but never had my name on the door. She thought I'd roll over, maybe cry, maybe resign. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd built my career in the shadows on purpose. You don't become the last line of digital defense without learning how to play long games in quiet rooms. The token sat in my drawer during the entire all-hands. I remember glancing at it after she muted me, just resting there on a mouse bed I hadn't washed since the Obama administration. A small, nondescript piece of metal and plastic. Most people would think it was a cheap thumb drive. But that token had more power than Lexi would ever understand. And the kicker, She never once asked who held it, never checked the audit trail, never read the 2019 restructure memo when legal quietly reassigned signer credentials after a failed merger attempt. She thought power was a spotlight. I knew it was a shadow with keys. By the end of the day, she sent out a thank you for your contributions email like I'd already packed my bags. But I didn't leave. I didn't even close my laptop. I just opened the system access logs, sat back, and waited for the first error to appear. It didn't take long, because without my signature, nothing goes out the door. And nothing had. 2 days later, they tried to make it official. I got the email from HR at 8:17 a.m., subject line, role termination and transition plan. It was dressed up in soft words like offboarding and graceful exit, like they were helping me into a nice retirement hammock instead of shoving me face first off a compliance cliff. They offered me 2 weeks severance, LinkedIn endorsement from someone named Becca I'd never met, and a list of optional exit interview times. Optional. Like I'd want to sit across from the same people who couldn't spell my title without checking the org chart. The best part? They copied legal but forgot to remove my name from the required signer field in the infrastructure release workflow. Classic. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the 9 a.m. Ops sync like nothing happened. Even brought a fresh cinnamon roll and a cup of black coffee that tasted like Betrayal and printer toner. My camera stayed off. So did my mic. For the first 20 minutes, Lexi did what she always did, spoke in aspirational nonsense about disruption as strategy, peppered with words like synergy and velocity like she was seasoning a chicken. The CTO sat beside her, ghost pale and stone-faced. His name's Mark. Been in the trenches together before she even learned what DevOps meant. He was quiet now. Too quiet. Then it happened. Lexi, still smiling like she'd won a scratch-off ticket, said with Michelle transitioning out, we'll be updating signer credentials this week. Just a routine process. That was it. I turned on my camera. No announcement. No words, just a click. And there I was, in a hoodie, hair in a bun, bags under my eyes. Very picture of someone you'd ignore in an airport Starbucks. I held up the token between my thumb and index finger like it was a communion wafer. Small, metal, worn around the edges. No glow, no bells, no drama, just a key. Mark, the CTO, froze. Then his chair scraped back with a god-awful screech and crashed to the floor. I swear to God, you could hear a mouse fart on that call. Lexi blinked. Mark, she asked, that clueless tilt only people who have never truly feared consequences can pull off. Mark didn't answer. He stood off camera, muttering something we couldn't hear. Then he came back into frame, color drained, voice tight. Michelle, he said slowly, can you confirm what that is? I smiled just slightly, held it closer to the camera. He nodded once. The kind of nod that means we're all completely screwed. Lexi tried to recover. Okay, let's not make a big deal out of hardware, she laughed shaky. We'll have IT deactivate her credentials, and no, Mark cut in sharper now. You can't. What? You can't deactivate that token, he said. It's not just a 2FA key. It's the production signer. The private key lives on it, and it's locked to her biometrics. Lexi's smile slid off her face like butter in a hot car. Wait, what? I thought, didn't legal say? They didn't say anything, I finally said, my first words of the meeting. Calm, precise, surgical. Because none of you ever asked. I turned my camera off again. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was epic, biblical, like the collective sound of 100 chickens coming home to roost. You have to understand, this wasn't just a glorified USB stick. That token was the root of trust. Every major software release, every compliance document, every log-certified handoff had to be cryptographically signed by the production key. Since 2019, that key had been me. Not mine, me. Lexi thought she could mute me, fire me, walk away and call that victory. But what she didn't realize was that the only thing keeping this company in compliance, keeping it legal, certified, insurable, was a tiny token bound to the one person she just publicly humiliated and tried to replace with a Slack bot. And now she was staring at the slow-motion wreckage of that decision. I didn't gloat. I didn't grandstand. I didn't need to, because the panic had already begun. After the call, legal pinged me 4 times. Hey, Michelle, quick clarification. Could you confirm? We'd just love to touch base. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop labeled when they forget who built it, double-clicked a file, and let the system logs play out like a symphony of silence. Every failed build, every rejected cert, every time Lexi's cronies tried to force a deployment without the signer key. One by one, The errors piled up like bones in a mass grave. I went to lunch. Because sometimes the loudest thing in the world is not a scream, but a locked door. They thought they could just swap me out like a burnt-out light bulb. That's how deep the arrogance ran. By mid-afternoon that same day, Lexi had already called an emergency meeting with legal and IT. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. I had 3 different back-channel windows open, one from an engineer in Build Ops who owed me for getting him out of a phishing scandal last year, one from a project manager who'd been quietly job hunting ever since Lexi changed the sprint schedule to match her astrology app, and one from Mark, the CTO, who wasn't saying much, but whose silence was starting to sound a lot like panic. Lexi's grand plan: assign the signer role to someone more aligned with future initiatives. That was the phrase she used, apparently. Real LinkedIn poetry. What she didn't understand was that the signer wasn't just some toggle you flip in the admin console. It wasn't a checkbox next to someone's name in the org chart. The production signer was a legally bound role, enshrined in the 2019 Compliance Restructure Agreement, Clause 7.4, if we're being precise, required biometric confirmation, dual-factor encryption, and most importantly, consent. You couldn't assign the key to someone else. I had to transfer it, willingly, in person, with 2 witnesses and a notary, no less. It was designed to prevent exactly the kind of dumbassery Lexi was attempting, and I helped write it. They didn't even bother to check before they tried to replace me. Deployments began to stall almost immediately. Next quarterly release was less than 72 hours out, and no new builds had passed compliance sign-off. A healthcare partner flagged a missing attestation log. A financial services client requested the audit trail from last week's hotfix. The logs showed nothing. Because without my signature, nothing had gone through. And by nothing, I mean nothing. Their first workaround attempt: clone my profile and try to spoof the key. The system rejected it in under 4 seconds, left a nice little unauthorized use attempt flag in the compliance dashboard too. I took a screenshot, framed it, laughed until I choked on a pretzel. Next, they tried to set up a new signer key entirely. But the infrastructure security protocol was hard-coded to reject any new signer unless approved by the current signer, a clause Lexi hadn't noticed because she never read more than 5 lines into anything that didn't have emojis. So there they were, stuck in a recursive loop of their own making, trying to override a lock I installed for the exact purpose of keeping idiots out of the launch pipeline. Then came the emails. The first one was polite. "Hi, Michelle, hope you're well. Just a quick clarification request the signer token, would love to get your input. No name at the bottom, just the legal team, I let it sit." The second email was more urgent. "Michelle, please respond ASAP. This is impacting client timelines." Still unsigned, still ignored. The third email, that one made me smile. Subject line: contractual discrepancy, immediate action requested. It came directly from Lexi's executive assistant, a poor soul named Jared who once asked me what a firewall was and whether it runs on electricity. "Hi, Michelle," it read. "There seems to be some ambiguity regarding your current role and responsibilities as signer. Per Lexi's direction, like to initiate transfer of duties to our interim compliance officer. Please return the token at your earliest convenience." I read it twice, then closed the tab. No reply, no acknowledgement. I went back to my Sudoku app and let the quiet burn slow. See, what they didn't realize was that by trying to erase me, they had made me indispensable. They'd spent so long treating infrastructure like plumbing, silent, boring, beneath notice. They forgot someone actually has to keep the pipes from bursting. And when the walls started leaking, the only person with the wrench was the one they just tried to throw out with the recycling. The balance of power didn't just shift, it tilted. Mark stopped trying to cover for Lexi. I could feel it in the way he started using full sentences again. I got word that he told the board, in not so many words, we're flying blind. One of the project leads looped me on a Slack thread accidentally. Their new compliance officer had already messed up a certificate handoff, nearly triggering a rollback. And me? I made tea, I read a book. I walked my neighbor's elderly schnauzer. Because when you've held the keys to the kingdom long enough, you don't need to bang on the gates when they lock you out. You are the gate. They built the system on trust in the invisible. Now that trust was gone, and I wasn't answering the door. Thursday morning, the system logs were stacking up like unpaid bar tabs, and Lexi still thought she was one motivational email away from a comeback. She hosted another stand-up that morning, trying to act like things were fine. "This is a temporary bottleneck," she chirped. "We're implementing a strategic reset of the compliance pipeline while exploring next-gen tooling." Translation: we broke it and have no idea how to glue it back together. Half the team pretended to take notes. The other half stared blankly, probably Googling how to file whistleblower reports. Meanwhile, back-channel messages were turning into full-blown leaks. It started with Mark. Poor guy hadn't slept since the token incident. He finally pulled up the original documentation from the 2019 restructure and found what I'd been waiting for them to notice. There it was. COO signature, legal countersignature. One perfect line in dull black Times New Roman that changed the entire game. Production signing authority shall reside solely with Michelle Reynolds, with no delegation permissible outside a live handoff ceremony, logged and witnessed by legal counsel. No backups, no override, no plan B. The document was buried in a compliance audit file from Q2 3 years ago, which Lexi had probably skimmed during her onboarding. She even bothered to open the folder marked Critical Infrastructure Do Not Alter. But now they were staring down the business end of that exact clause. And worse, I never turned the token in. Lexi, of course, did what Lexi does. She brushed it off. "We'll just override her," she said, loud enough for 3 people in legal to consider early retirement. Mark stood up during that meeting, pushed his laptop slightly to the side, said with a voice so flat you could iron shirts on it, "You can't override a signer in production. That triggers Clause 11.2. "What's Clause 11.2? Lexi asked, already annoyed. "That any unauthorized override attempt of the signer protocol initiates a breach audit, automatically escalated to board-level risk review and third-party compliance monitoring." Lexi blinked. "Okay, but," and Mark continued, "locks the entire deployment pipeline for 72 hours minimum while the breach is assessed." Silence. Not the awkward kind, but the real kind. The kind that has weight. The kind that makes you realize the fire isn't coming, it's already inside the building. That afternoon, legal sent a second summary to the board, walking them through the problem. I saw it, not because they included me, but because someone in ops forwarded it to me with the subject line. "They're sweating." It was beautiful. 10 pages of bullet points and regrets. Summary: no releases, no signer, no response from Michelle. Quarterly compliance report now at risk. Financial clients spooked. One big-name vendor had already paused integrations pending clarification of signer continuity. And there I was, still quiet, still waiting, because I knew the game better than any of them. This wasn't about the token anymore. It was about time. Time I controlled. Every hour that passed was another spoonful of pressure. They had 29 hours left before the next compliance deadline. Every second without a signature was a red flag to clients, auditors, and anyone else watching our systems like a hawk. I didn't need to threaten them. I just needed to let their own paperwork do the work. That night, Mark messaged me. "Just 2 words, you win." I didn't reply. Not yet, because we weren't at the end. Not even close. I needed them desperate. I needed them to ask. The first breach hit at 7:06 a.m. on Friday. A fintech client, not even one of our biggest, but loud enough to echo, submitted a formal request for deployment logs tied to the latest patch cycle. They'd been promised a minor update to their encryption key rollover service. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just a little back-end housekeeping, scheduled and greenlit 2 days prior by Lexi's new compliance golden boy, a guy who once tried to submit a PDF as a YAML file. The problem? There were no logs, no release signatures, no attestation records, no build hashes, nothing in the vault, because nothing ever launched. Because someone forgot that in our system, the rocket only leaves the launchpad if I press the button. Client flagged it as a potential service gap. SLA requires all client-facing patches be signed with audit trail confirmation. No exceptions. Legal scrambled. At 8:21 a.m., they received an audit request from the client's legal team. By 8:54 a.m., internal compliance systems auto-flagged the absence of a signer log as an unresolved breach. And by 9:03 a.m., ah yes, sweet 9:03, that's when Clause 11.3 kicked in. Let me read it to you like it's gospel, because it might as well be. If any breach remains unresolved beyond the 48-hour notification threshold, breach propagation protocol initiates, transferring legal and financial liability for noncompliance to the executive board until remediate by the designated signer. Translation: Tick-freaking-tock. Without a resolution in 48 hours, the hot potato lands in the board's lap. And guess what? I wasn't answering their emails. I'd set my out of office the night before. Custom message. Cold, surgical, subject, urgent signer access request. If you are reaching out regarding production signer access, refer to the original authorization form. Page 4. Best of luck, MR. It wasn't a refusal. It wasn't hostile. It was a redirect to a document buried deep enough to make them sweat, but public enough to make it their fault if they didn't read it. I watched the panic unfold like a live feed. Someone in facilities saw Lexi crying in her office. Mark stopped answering her calls. Slack channels lit up with things like, does anyone know if the key is hardware bound? And what happens if breach propagation isn't resolved in time? With 3 question marks like it would help. The board scheduled a call for 2 p.m. that day. The subject line was simple. Clause 11.3, emergency review. Wasn't invited, but I knew exactly what they were saying. Lexi had tried to reassign the token. She had tried to bluff authority, and now she triggered the one clause designed to make executive arrogance hurt. One director flagged the potential exposure at $3.2 million in service credits if the propagation continued past deadline. Another quietly asked legal if Lexi's decision-making authority extended to signer revocation. The answer was no, never did. And sitting in my apartment, coffee in hand, feet up on the window ledge, I watched as the power structure that used to laugh behind my back finally realized what it meant to have ignored the infrastructure woman. They thought I was out of the game. They thought muting me muted the systems. What they never understood, what Lexi, in all her glittering mediocrity, never once paused to consider, was that I wasn't reacting to her plan. I built the system that was chewing her alive. Every clause, every signer rule, every fail-safe. They weren't just protocols, they were warnings, and now they were ringing. By the time the board recessed that afternoon, 4 directors had lawyered up. A 5th one, someone I'd never spoken to, sent me a single message. Is there a way forward? I left it unread, because I didn't want a path forward. I wanted them to understand that the only way out now was through me. Saturday morning, the rats were already fighting over which one of them had lit the match. Lexi's first move was as predictable as it was pathetic. Blame Mark. She looped him into a board thread, CC'd half of legal, and opened with I was under the impression the CTO approved all signer transitions. The kind of corporate jujitsu that only works when there's no paper trail. And Lexi, God bless her, had never understood that in a world of digital systems, everything is a paper trail. Mark replied with a single forwarded thread, dated 3 weeks back. Subject line, signer transition Lexi's request. In it, Lexi clearly stated, Michelle should no longer hold compliance authority. I've reviewed her external activities and determined she's a conflict risk. Let's expedite reassignment. There's no need to wait for her input. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Her words, her choice. Silence followed. A kind of silence you only get when a boardroom realizes it's about to become a crime scene. One director removed himself from a public Slack channel the next hour. Another quietly untagged himself from Lexi's celebratory LinkedIn post from 6 weeks ago, the one where she announced her agile vision for restructuring legacy ops. The board's tone shifted from tight-throated concern to full-on insulation. They weren't trying to solve the problem, we're trying to survive it. Meanwhile, I was still quiet, still waiting, not because I was feeling merciful, but because the power was in stillness. When everyone else is panicking, the calm one becomes the anchor. I let Lexi drown in her own wake while I sipped cold brew and updated the kill log with every failed deployment. The CTO, Mark, finally messaged me at 11:02 a.m. Just one line, this is going to get uglier. Just so you know, I replied. An hour later, I got the first private message from a board member. Not from their company address, no, that would be too traceable, but from a Gmail I hadn't seen in 5 years. Subject, private request, Michelle. I'm not here to defend Lexi. You've been treated unfairly, and that's obvious now to everyone. We need to stop the bleed. Is there a way to make this right? I didn't respond immediately. I read it 3 times. It wasn't an apology, wasn't an olive branch. It was a white flag with conditions. But more importantly, it wasn't a message sent to legal, or HR, or Lexi. It was sent to me, direct, unfiltered, personal. The shift was complete. Lexi, once the heir apparent, was now radioactive. No one wanted to stand near her. Her last public message in Slack, let's stay solutions-focused, team, went unreacted to. No emojis, no thumbs up, just a digital tumbleweed rolling by while engineers quietly DM'd each other asking how soon they could apply elsewhere. I heard, through the grapevine, that Lexi tried one last Hail Mary. She went to legal and asked if the signer clause could be renegotiated under extenuating circumstances. The lawyer reportedly laughed. Not kindly, not loudly. Just laughed like someone had asked if they could time travel through red tape. And while she was flailing, the system kept reminding them who was still holding the lock. Every failed deployment triggered a new email alert. Every audit checkpoint bounced. Every request for a rollback was met with authorization required by current production signer. My name, still there, still immovable. I began drafting my terms, not because I wanted back in, but because it was time to define how I'd walk out. Not quietly, not bitterly, but with precision. Let them crawl first, and we'd talk. Sunday morning, 8:03 a.m. sharp, my phone lit up with a calendar invite. Zoom call urgent compliance resolution. Participants, legal counsel, board member S. Trammell, board member R. Ghaffari, time, 9:00 a.m. No agenda attached. They didn't even bother to hide the desperation anymore. I accepted. I didn't rush to look professional. No makeup. No blazer. Just my old zip-up hoodie and the quiet smirk of someone who's already measured the exits. My coffee mug said world's okayest engineer. I meant it ironically. They didn't. At 8:58, I clicked join. The room was already live. 2 board members I'd only seen in stock photos. One with perfect hair, one with dead eyes. Legal was there too, Dana. I think her name was. Wore a look like she'd been aging in dog years since Friday. No one spoke for the first 5 seconds. Then Trammell leaned in, fake earnest. Michelle, first of all, thank you for joining on such short notice. We deeply value your contributions, and save it, I said, tone flat. You didn't call to thank me. Dana cleared her throat. We're here to resolve a few outstanding issues before tomorrow's deadline, meaning before Clause 11.3 detonates like a compliance nuke, and their D&O insurer starts asking very awkward questions about how exactly they let a signer get publicly muted without a transition plan. I took a slow sip of coffee and let them squirm. Then I nodded. I'll unlock the system. Collective exhale, like a hostage negotiator just heard the word surrender. But I continued, we're doing this my way. Dana blinked. Of course. Then reason? Let's define reason, I said. First, I want trailing equity. 3 years, vested, Class B shares, nothing fancy, just recognition for the infrastructure I held together while your niece LARPed as a leader. Trammell frowned. That might require board review. I smiled. You have an hour. No one responded. Second, I went on, I want public documentation. My authority as production signer, reinstated and posted internally. Not buried in SharePoint, not hidden behind legalese. I want every VP and their pet intern to know who held the line. Ghaffari shifted uncomfortably. We could issue a clarification memo, not a memo. I leaned in, close to the camera now, an acknowledgement with signatures, and archived in every compliance handoff doc going forward. Dana was typing. Good. Third, I said, Lexi is removed from the compliance chain. Permanently. I don't care what other vanity title you give her. Make her director of office plant hydration for all I care. But she never touches systems, workflows, or approvals again. Trammell looked like he was chewing his own teeth. Lastly, I added, voice dropping, there will be no NDA. Ghaffari straightened. That's highly unusual. I'm not here to write a tell-all, I interrupted. But I won't let you bury this. You made me invisible for 14 years, then tried to erase me. I want the right to say I stopped this building from burning down. You get your compliance restored. I get my voice back. They paused, huddled, muted themselves for a moment. I waited, checked my nails, then they came back. Dana spoke first. We'll need a few hours to draw up revised terms, but we can agree in principle. I didn't smile. Not yet. Good, I said, because if you hesitate another 24 hours, Clause 11.3 hits your insurer. I leaned even closer. The camera blurred slightly from the movement, and the moment your insurer sees that breach propagation was triggered by a nepotism play gone sideways, your whole board gets lit up in discovery. Silence, the kind that tastes like surrender. I clicked leave meeting. I didn't wait for a reply. Monday, 7:42 a.m. The city was still half asleep as I walked through the glass doors of HQ one last time. No badge swipe, no security escort. They'd reactivated my credentials at 3:17 a.m. after the board finally signed the amended terms, and Dana sent me a midnight email marked executed. No fanfare. No apology. Just a silent acknowledgement of leverage doing what morality couldn't. I didn't look around. The place hadn't changed, but it felt different, like a mausoleum built on gaslighting and flavored seltzer. Open floor plan buzzed faintly with keyboards, and people pretending not to stare as I passed. No one said anything. They just watched, like they knew. Like they'd finally read the fine print on the system they thought ran itself. I took the elevator alone to legal on the 14th floor. The ride was quiet, except for the hum of old fluorescent lights and the faint crackle of my knuckles. My hoodie sleeves pushed up, token in my palm, warm from the walk, scuffed from 3 years in a drawer that held too many memories and not enough thank yous. Legal was waiting. Dana sat behind her desk, face pale, papers neatly aligned like it would somehow undo the chaos she'd helped create. On the table between us, they'd placed a small black velvet pad. Centered, spotlit, like an altar. I didn't sit. I walked up, slow and deliberate, and laid the token on the pad. No speech, no flourish, just release. System logs would confirm the transfer, biometric check-in, authenticated drop. Final keysign message pushed to the vault at 7:45:02. Compliance restored. Audits cleared. Liability contained. Behind me, through the glass wall, I caught sight of Mark, the CTO, standing at the edge of engineering. He didn't come in, didn't say a word, but he watched. And when our eyes met, he nodded. Not apology, not pity, just respect. And that was enough. I turned without a word and walked out, past the frosted conference rooms where Lexi once held her innovation huddles, past the digital wall still showing system status. Error, awaiting signature, past the reception desk where I'd once been mistaken for IT support by a new hire who couldn't find the printer. I stepped into the elevator, alone again, and pressed G. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun was fully up. My cat blinked at me from the window. The inbox had already filled with new terms, new offers, new companies suddenly interested in the infrastructure woman who held the keys. I ignored them all. I opened a drawer in the back of my closet and pulled out the real prize. The second token, identical to the one I'd handed over, except this one didn't open any systems. It opened memory. I set it gently into the frame I'd prepped the night before. Black matte border, white card under glass. Beneath the token, in clean typewriter font, it read, "You muted me." But I signed the system. Then I sat down, poured a drink, and finally, let the silence feel like peace. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.